All right. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I am joined by this fabulous panel, and it is an absolute honor and privilege to welcome Andreas, Ariel, Praga, Alex to the stage to talk about the unwritten rules of engagement on LinkedIn. So far, we've talked about our kind of overarching strategy for LinkedIn. You all have dug in and started to define and create your own strategy. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how we show up on LinkedIn, how we engage with other people, and really make the most of building relationships on LinkedIn. So I'm just going to do a real quick intro for those of you who don't already know the fantastic panelists that we have up here with us today. First, I want to welcome Andreas. Andreas is the CEO and co-founder of Skaled Analytics. If you don't know what Skaled Analytics is, you're missing out, and you definitely want to go check it out after this. You heard at the beginning, I referenced some of the stats on my LinkedIn usage. That's all coming from Skaled Analytics. It's the only app that lets you look at month over month analytics for how you're doing on LinkedIn. It's currently being used in 50 plus countries by top influencers, fast-growing tech companies, and top firms around the world. Praga is also joining us from Skaled. She is the head of marketing at Skaled. She has a bachelor's in fashion and MBA and has helped to lead marketing campaigns for Reebok, Bot Supply, and now Skaled. Praga has only been with Skaled for 4 months, but her name is already synonymous with the company brand. It's absolutely amazing, fantastic. Like, it blows my mind. When I saw that, I had to double check it. I was like, no way, she's only been there for 4 months. But it's so cool to see. And then we have Ariel Lee with us. Ariel works in finance. She is the absolute master of engagement on LinkedIn, a true unicorn. She specializes in creating meaningful conversations in a non-icky way that leads to inbound inquiries. And finally, we have Alex Sheridan, who is the founder of Impacts. I mentioned him a bit earlier in the session today because I used your headline, Alex, as an example earlier. But Alex helps entrepreneurs generate revenue through LinkedIn by creating top-notch video content and social selling strategies. He creates seriously awesome video content on LinkedIn. So if you're not already connected to him, definitely go follow him on LinkedIn. All right. Are you all ready?
Of course.
Ready. Let's do it.
All right. I'll try to say people's names beforehand, but if I ask a question and you want to jump in, just jump in. We're all friends here. So I just want to do a kind of quick round robin and get a sense from everyone. We'll start with you, Andreas. When did you get started on LinkedIn? When did you really get active there, and what got you started?
Great questions, and thanks for the nice introduction. Super humbled by that, and being in this panel as well. So LinkedIn for me started years ago, but not in the way that we are going to talk about it today. As most people, I've had a LinkedIn profile for quite a while, and it's only up until recently, past 2 years or so, basically after we started Skaled, that I started posting. So 2020 was sort of the year for me where I realized the huge potential of LinkedIn. And then 2021 has shown to be a really good year as well so far. So for me, that's about the journey. And 2020 was super interesting in terms of content and engagement and everything. And I'm sure we're going to jump into that a bit later. But thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And Praga, what about you? I know that you've only been with Skaled for 4 months now, but I did a little bit of deep stalking a couple of weeks ago, and I know that you've been active on LinkedIn for a long time. So what kind of got you started?
Actually, I've been active on LinkedIn since, if I'm not mistaken, when I say active, I mean intentionally active, since July last year. And it's actually because of me being active on LinkedIn that Andreas spotted me. We started chatting, and this is where I am today. So I've been active since July, but it's been just consistently, I've been increasing how active do I want to stay, how much do I want to post, etc. But it's been incredible.
So what got you started, though? It's what's interesting to me or jumps out to me is that you've been in marketing, and a lot of times I see marketers that aren't as active on their own personal pages because they're running company pages, right? I mean, that makes sense. But what really prompted you to get active on your own personal page?
And it's so true what you say, because if you're posting from not just your personal profile, but also from a company page, etc., you almost feel like you're exhausted for the day or you've done content creation for the day. So it's very hard to do both. But what actually got me started was when I moved from the B2C, so in my previous Reebok, etc., consumer brand life, when I moved from there to SaaS, I suddenly saw that the whole SaaS world, everybody who was interesting was active. And that kind of triggered me to be active. And I felt like I had something to say as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is very true that I don't see a lot of marketers who are active on their own pages. And you're doing such creative stuff with what I assume you're doing with Shield's company page now too. But Ariel, what about you? What got you started?
Well, I started with the typical resume holder back in 2014, but didn't really become active in the way that I am now till October of 2020. And I'm building a new business right now that's typically built with face-to-face prospecting. So I got driven online, spent a couple months doing it the typical icky way where you're like DMing people you've never met and asking for 15-minute intro calls. And nobody was responding really well to that. And I was like, why don't people want to talk to me? And eventually it just clicked that like, they don't want to talk to me because that's not me. Like that blurb message that I'm being told to send is not who I am. Let's do it a little bit differently. So I joke and say like, I found who I was supposed to be in October.
One of our SDRs at Skaled likened it to dating. If you are not interesting, if you don't have your own stuff going on, like if you're not active and posting on LinkedIn, then no one's going to be interested in you because you're too needy. So I thought that was hilarious and reminded me a bit of what you just said. Alex, I know we talked about this just a few weeks ago, and you did some incredible things while you were still working at your past company. But what prompted you, right? What made you say, hey, I'm going to start showing up on LinkedIn?
Yeah, it's interesting that we were all sort of on mute at one point and then became unmute. And now here we are today. So just the opportunities are endless. But I started this profile because I had profiles like a lot of people that I just wasn't doing anything with or from my previous jobs. And I started my own company late 2019. And I started this profile with 0 followers, late 2019. And that's when I made the decision and I committed to using LinkedIn to build a community, to win clients, to build a brand, to put out content consistently. And, like anyone, made a lot of mistakes, a lot of failures in the beginning, but I made a commitment to sticking with this. And here I am.
I love it. I feel like the thing that's so hard for so many people about getting started is the first few posts, they don't generate a ton of anything, right? It's like I posted a few times, something magical is supposed to happen, but nothing's happening. Like, what am I doing wrong? So does anyone want to jump in? How did you get over that hump when you first started posting and nobody was really liking or commenting or engaging with your stuff? Like, what kept you going?
The few who did engage, that was it for me. So for me, when I started posting, I even looked back in Shield not long ago to check some of my first posts, and they got like 10 likes or no comments, stuff like that. And that went on for quite a while. But I think to me, what stood out was not the need to have a large volume of people engaging right from the start, but just nurture those and get in touch with those who did, right? So for me, those 10 people or 5 people who started engaging, those were the ones I cared about, right? And I just kept it at that. And I had time then to DM everyone back and so forth. That's a complete opposite scenario right now. But that's how I started. And I didn't really, care that I didn't get viral posts like that or anything of the sorts, because it didn't really matter to me. I believed in the value of LinkedIn, and then I just went in and kept going. So that was it for me.
I sort of let my content take a back seat. Like, I posted because I knew it was important, but just like Andreas, it was like I'd get 5 or 10 likes and just a few comments. but really prioritized commenting and engaging with other people, and tried to engage with second degree connections so that I'm not just like creating this echo chamber. I'm constantly meeting new people that I find interesting and engaging. And I found that it was much better to leave a meaningful comment on somebody's content and then send a connection request. They would almost always accept, versus the typical, like if you send a cold connection request, you maybe got a 25% shot at them accepting your request, especially with my headline. But I think that comments were the key for me, 100%. It just clicked that like my name is going to show up. And for me, what's important here is that people know who I am and what I do and where to find me. And so the more comments that I can leave to support other people, the more people know who I am.
I think for me, you know, this may sound funny, but for me, I looked at a lot of other creators that were doing decently well. And I was like, if they're doing this, why can't I? Like there was nothing magical. There was nothing out of this world crazy that they were doing. I just noted, I'd go back and look at their posts and I'm like, they're just consistently showing up. And it seemed like they knew what they were doing. They probably figured out it over time. So I let that kind of drive me. If one person can do it, you know, why can't I, right? So the belief in it and the faith, but then that mixed with the mindset of this, you got to go into it like anything that you want to be successful at is not going to happen overnight. So you would never say, I want to learn how to play tennis. I've never played tennis in my entire life. And I'm going to go to the court today. And I want to be like Serena, you know, like in a couple sessions, I want this to be amazing. And I'm going to just be back, you know, doing all this stuff on the tennis court. We would never expect that. Yet for some reason, when it comes to content creation and LinkedIn, we think that the stars should align for us right away. And it just doesn't work that way. You got to put in a lot of work.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty much the same for me. When I started, it was, I think in some way, I kind of leveraged a time in my life which probably gave me a little more advantage because I was finishing my MBA last year. So I had things to talk about that were a little bit different. So I kind of was speaking from that perspective. If I managed to publish something in a business journal, I could publish that. So it was the typical things, but I always try to give it a little bit more storytelling spin. And I saw that those posts actually got lots of traction. And that kind of was like, okay, so there is something that's happening here. And that egged me on. And then I said, okay, I'm going to continue this.
That's such a good point. I feel like I hear all the time people are wanting to wait until they feel like they're an expert at something before they feel comfortable posting about it. But no, the easiest and best way to do it is to share what you're learning along the way, because you have this like continuous stream of prompts because you just learned something and now you can go talk about it, right? So we kind of talked about posting content, but you know, at least today, and Andreas recognizing it's a little bit different, you know, everyone's in a different place maybe in the journey, because at some point it becomes very overwhelming to respond to every comment, every message. But what percentage of your time is spent creating content, like posting a post versus responding to other people's content, publishing comments on LinkedIn?
So for me right now, I'm almost only trying to cater to my own content and my own audience. Like I post, and then since I'm averaging hundreds of reactions and comments by now, I'm super busy just getting back to those people. And speaking with you now, I almost feel bad because someone in the audience may follow me and I have yet to get back to people from posts I made a week ago, right? So I have hundreds of unresponded comments, and I even wrote a post about creators should reply to comments, right? So for me, that's just, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, but it's mostly my own posts and then getting back to people on my own posts and then all the inbound connections and DMs I get every time I post. So I just try to cater to that. So my LinkedIn experience has changed, whereas first, it was sort of this phase where I did a lot of outbound, let's say, where I connected with a bunch of people who I thought was really interesting. And then I started, engaging on their content and so forth, while posting a bit myself. But now I'm strictly posting myself and barely scrolling the feed anymore because I always have notifications that are calling for my attention. And I want to be polite. I want to get back to people. But I also want to keep my sanity, which is sort of how I try to balance everything right now. But I'm curious, can I pass it to Ariel? Because I know that you're getting a lot of comments always, and I'm super curious about that. Like, what goes on? Like, how do you manage to do that? And even get back to people at that scale?
I'm always embarrassed when I get this question, and I get it a lot. But really, I have no life. Like I have two computers.
That's it.
And so I have
that's
LinkedIn
the
up.
answer.
I have LinkedIn up 100% of the time on one computer, and I have my work stuff on the other computer, and I'm literally multitasking. Like I take my phone in the shower and answer DMs and comments while I'm in the, like, it's really pathetic. I'm so embarrassed.
I'm with you while you're in the shower.
So, I mean, it is what it is, but I feel very strongly that it's important to answer every comment and every DM. And I am so, I don't want to like casually use the term OCD, but it's so important to me to be responsive that if I'm going to be away for a few hours, I put up an away message in my DMs and just say like, I've got meetings for the next few hours. Don't be upset if I can't get back to you. I know, right? Isn't that beautiful?
For a couple hours?
Yeah. And so, and I deliberately, it's a game, right? Like my post today, I knew was not going to be one of my, I think my comment average is like in the 140s, but that's some that are in the 60s and 70s and some that are in the 250s. And so I deliberately put a post up today that like, I know this one's not going to do that well. So it'll be a slow day because I've got all this other stuff on my plate. So like, I deliberately put things out based on how my day is going to go. But I also am very intentional to interact with the people who are most supportive of me. So I have bookmarks of activity pages of people I want to make sure to keep in touch with. So I'm not really doing a lot of mindless scrolling of the feed, but I definitely try to support other people's content as often as I can. But really the answer to that is I have no life and I'm on LinkedIn all the time.
So, Ariel, what amount of your time is spent writing your own content versus engaging with other people?
I have a rule that if I can't, and it's skewed because I can only do text posts, right? I can't do video. So obviously this isn't going to work for Alex, but if I can't get the post written in 5 minutes, then I just scrap the idea because I've found that if it's like, otherwise it's going to be forced. So if it's not flowing from my brain to my fingers, then that's not going to work. But that's not saying I think of it and then write it in 5 minutes. The idea might have come 2 days ago when I was in the grocery store or whatever. It just, if I can't write it in 5 minutes, I don't do it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think what, you guys, I mean, what Andrea said is pretty spot on in terms of the progression of a content creator, right? In the beginning, you don't have a lot of attention on you. So naturally, you got to go out and you got to seek out the attention and get in front of people, engage, leave meaningful comments. And then the more content you put out, if it's doing its job, is bringing more people to you. And then you've got to respond, but a lot of it is to your own comments. And so there's only that certain amount of time that you have. And you don't want to not comment with somebody or engage with somebody that's coming to you versus you go missing out on that to go engage on somebody that has no clue who you are, maybe doesn't quite know you yet. So I think that's exactly what happened to me. I mean, I do the best that I can on my own post. I'm a little bit more like, I'm very like process and I've got a system and I've got a time block. I'm really like OCD, like I am OCD about it in terms of like, I have from 10 to 11, I'm doing my prospecting on Sales Navigator. From 7 to 7:30, I'm writing my content and scripts with my coffee. Like for me, that's helped. Like I silo it. So it's really helped me not take up my entire day because I only want to be on LinkedIn maybe 2 to 3 hours a day. And I only want to create content for a certain period of time per day too. And so I've tried to take that creativity and put like a process and a structure around it. And that's something that's helped me.
I think you're right about the phases there, that at first, like we just discussed, right? The first phase is sort of the outbound phase when there's no attention on you and you have a new profile or an old profile you're trying to revive. And you have to do a lot of work to be out there commenting and writing your own content, sending a bunch of connection requests. And I did that. I think I outbound connected with thousands of people to begin with because no one was connecting with me. Why would they? I didn't put out content. I didn't do anything. So I had to sort of build that up. And then at some point, there was this inflection point where I started to gain followers consistently when I post and when I engage and when I write comments. And now I barely do any outbound connection requests or anything of the sort because everything comes inbound, right? So that's sort of the shift. And I like to refer to that as some sort of content market fit. Because at some point, if you keep posting and you keep doubling down on what works, and you look at numbers, and you look at who's engaging, and you're driving what matters to you, and you keep doing that, then it's sort of opens up this whole playing field that has no ceiling, where people can just continuously follow you and engage with you. And that's what's happening for me right now, and what I've observed a lot of content creators also encounter on their journeys. That's super interesting.
I was just looking at the mute button. I can add that actually it's interesting because I think everybody else is kind of ahead in terms of the traction that they're generating with their content. And I feel like I'm at a point where I have the time to reply to DMs, to answer to each and every comments. But I've seen a shift in the last few weeks that I'm getting more and more comments. And then it becomes, when it reaches 100 comments, it becomes very difficult to real-time reply. And then you have to say that, okay, there are like 30, 40 that I haven't gone back to, so I'm going to go back tomorrow. And it's and I can see, because I see Andreas struggling with it all the time, so I can see what the difference would be. That if it's just 100 comments and you're struggling, then what happens if it's 100 comments every single day? So I'm glad I'm not in that bucket yet.
Like, I think that's what's important for people to realize too, is like, we all want high engagement, and it's good. I don't think any of us would not want it, because it brings in leads and business and builds our brand. But when you get 100 comments or 150, 200, whatever comments it is, half of those are probably you. So let's just say it's 75 to 100, maybe on the lower end for us, right? That we got to engage. If we're pretty much commenting back on everyone's comment that they leave, that's 75 to 100 comments that I'm dropping just on my post for that day, let alone the DMs, the other stuff, in the news feed. So, I mean, that's where that shift really starts to take a lot of your time. And again, you'd hate to pass up on somebody that at your doorstep saying, "Hey, I like your stuff," to say, I'm going to forget you. I'm going to go out there and just find somebody else and hope they like me. You got to go where the warmest activity is first. And so that is the gradual shift. You only have so much time in the day.
Thanks for saying that, Alex. I was just going to ask, we're talking a lot about responding to all these comments, but, why is that so important? And I think you kind of answered it perfectly. It's because these are people who are already raising their hand and saying, hey, I like what you're putting out. Or maybe they hate it. Maybe that's why they're commenting on it. But
that's good too.
Trolls.
But these are people that, are warm, like it's easy to talk to them.
Yes.
So wouldn't you just respond, right? And then what's the case for, and anyone can take this, like why bother going out and finding other people's content to comment on? Like it's one thing to scroll your feed and write a quick comment, but why would you go seek out like, oh, I'm going to comment on this person's post specifically? Like what's the purpose of that?
Well, a lot of times it could be a potential customer. So, you typically want to have some type of outreach or social selling strategy for most people, unless you're getting so many inbound leads that you can't, manage it. But for a lot of folks, especially if you're just getting started or somewhat newer, you want to have a social selling process and an engagement strategy where you're going out there and you're communicating and commenting on the potential customer's content, their post, and you're driving conversation. You're getting to know them. Now you're having a conversation that you can then take to them if it makes sense to. They're showing up in your feed more. You're showing up in their feed more. So you definitely don't want to just go on LinkedIn and say, all right, I'm going through my feed. Hopefully someone good in here pops up. I hope it works out. Hopefully I'll land a customer. That's not really the best outreach strategy. You may do that some of the time, but you also got to say, hey, I strategically need to go out there and find the people that are in my niche and make sure that I'm having meaningful conversations with them on their content too.
Mm-hmm. I think another strategy for that is also like if you see someone who has a big audience that overlaps with the people you want to engage with and you want to attract with your content, if you go to their post consistently and leave thoughtful comments and their audience sees you, then they're going to go to your profile, follow you, and start discovering your content, right? And then you can sort of share that audience and drive people towards you if you are out there leaving these comments, which could be considered like micro content, micro posts on someone else's content. And then that sort of creates this effect of bringing people in. So I think that's a complementary strategy to what Alex just said.
Yeah, I call it secondary content. Your engagement's kind of your secondary content, right? Mm-hmm. It's a thought, it's a piece of a mini content it's not the primary, but it's important.
Absolutely, and you can take those comments and upcycle them into posts. And I think that's one of the things that I do, because like imagine you put out a post, right? And that could be a thought that's not fully thought through or something like that. That's often the type of content I create. So I just put it out there to see sort of what is the response. And then when people start asking questions in the comments, or they start stating opposing views or whatever it may be, that's super interesting because that gets me thinking. And then when I reply to them, that's new content in and of itself. And I save those replies that make sense, or those small back and forth on the threads in the comments. And then new content has been almost created by me and that person who engaged. So that's the way I come up with new content, and especially on the posts that resonate with a lot of people amongst the audience that I would want to engage with. So that's really interesting. Secondary content. I haven't heard that before. I used to call it micro.
Because I made it up.
Oh man.
No. I've talked about it in many posts before. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry for not seeing your content, but I just explained myself. I don't scroll the feed. Sorry.
Yeah,
but secondary content, that's great.
It's all good.
The other thing I love about what both of you guys are saying is just that it's really hard to get noticed by someone by sending a direct message on LinkedIn. It's hard to strike up an authentic conversation unless you see someone else putting out content. When you go comment on their post, it's really, if Alex comes and comments on my post, it's like, oh, Alex is great. Like I just love him automatically because he's commenting on my stuff. So it's a great way to be seen and heard by people that you're trying to get in front of.
I can add one thing that has worked for me. If I want to get noticed by someone, I feel it's even nicer if you react or comment back on someone else's comment to someone else's post, because it's almost like Ariel says something and I say something in her comments, and then Andreas comes in and says something, replies to me. Then it's almost like you get an affirmation of something you're saying somewhere else. So it's like a closer bond in some way.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, you're like on the same team. You're on the same side about this thing, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love it. Okay, so I want to make sure we get to a couple of the questions that have been coming through in the chat over here, but I just want to, what's the business case for this? Like Alex and Andreas, I know that you're both, well, and Ariel in some ways too, you're your own owner of your business, right? Like, what's the business case for this? Because we're talking a ton about spending like 2 or 3 or 5 or all hours of the day on LinkedIn, taking LinkedIn in the shower with us. Why? Why is this more effective than anything else you could be doing with that time?
I don't know if it's more effective than anything else. I mean, I haven't tried much else. I know this is effective, which is why we keep doing it. But for reference, like in the Shield team, we've had approximately 2 million organic views in the first quarter of this year, tens of thousands of reactions on our content, tens of thousands of comments as well, including our own, and a lot of shares and a lot of new followers coming in across the team. And that is just driving our business. I mean, obviously, we make LinkedIn analytics as software, so it's very tied into being present on LinkedIn as well. But the thousands of people who use Shield, we see the same, right? Those that get good engagement and a lot of views, they also thrive in whatever they do. It may be nonprofit organizations, it may be school projects, it may be solopreneurs, it may be startups, it may be very established Fortune 500 companies. And they all leverage the same. And it's this word of mouth thing. And when it comes from people within an organization, though, when people on the Shield team, they post and they're visible and they're out there representing the company that they work for, including themselves, that just makes a whole lot of sense, both from an individual perspective and also a company perspective. So the ROI is definitely there, but it just doesn't show at first, which is why I think a lot of people also have the doubts about starting.
Yeah. And Andreas, I want to, Adam asked a really pointed question to you. It doesn't sound to me like you do have a team that is writing your content or responding to your comments. Otherwise, you'd be able to get to them. So Andreas is doing this all himself.
Yeah, everything. I don't have any automation or anything. I use Shield, obviously, but that's it, right? Yeah, no automation, no team. And when I said team, I meant like Pragya and the rest of my team posting on their own and doing their own thing as well. So
And
Yeah.
sometimes when I want his attention, I even tell him, okay, I'm going to reply to your comments if you want. Why don't you look at this instead? He's like, no, please get out of here.
I don't think you can outsource that, to be honest. Like, I don't think you can. If you really want to scale your personal brand, of course you can get a head start or take shortcuts and have some sort of VA respond to comments or something of the sorts. But I think that people will feel that they're not connected with you eventually. They don't have a relationship with you, and they may realize now, or they may realize later. And I'm pretty sure if I felt like I was engaging with Pragya, and then I realized a year later that I've been talking to a VA when I meet her in real life, and she's like, who the hell are you? And I'm like, we've been talking online for ages now. I would feel like being part of the TV show Catfish, right? So that wouldn't work. So for me, if you want to be authentic, which personal branding is all about, then you have to do it yourself. And when it gets hard, I mean, that's because you did well. That's how I see it. And then you got to deal with that and come up with some strategy to manage, right? So that's what I think about it anyway.
For me, the use case is that, one, I'm a little bit lazy. Like, I do not like to do cold calling. The alternative in my universe would literally be to walk around and knock on doors to meet new people. And that just sounds absolutely miserable to me. So if I can have fun with my friends on the internet and show enough of my personality that people want to work with me and get inbound messages. I mean, I do 0 outbound outreach, period. I feel like I probably am leaving some things on the table, because if I was a little bit more pushy, I would probably be doing that much better. But the inbound strategy works. I haven't made a phone call that somebody didn't reach out to me and ask me to make in 6 months. And that's really powerful for me. Like I said, I know I could be doing more with outbound, but the content creation and just being a decent human on LinkedIn has accounted for every speck of my business.
Yeah. I mean, well said. The business case is if you want to generate revenue for your business, if that sounds pretty cool to you, then you might want to get in the game a little bit here. And then building your brand. If you want to get invited to industry things, if you want to be a part of the community, if you want your customers to come to you and already know they want to buy from you before they even get on the Zoom call, that's powerful stuff. So, I mean, that's the power of all this is getting in front of your customers before they even potentially even know they might need what you have to offer. And you're in front of them, and there's some social proof, and there's some testimonials, and you're providing value to them, and they see you as credible, and they know, like, and trust you before that first engagement a lot of times even happens. By the way, I was on the side for 6 years at my corporate job before I started this business. All I did was cold calls and emails and knocking on doors. And now I do 0 of that. And I can tell you this is a hell of a lot better. And it's way more fun, and it's more lucrative. I can tell you that for a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to know when Chris figures out what he could be doing that would be a better use of his time. I want to know what that is.
Yeah.
Well, it recently. Have you guys seen that best of LinkedIn on Instagram where they screenshot people on LinkedIn and make fun of them? So anyway, it was basically somebody making fun of me for spending too much time on LinkedIn, and all the comments were like, "That's exactly what I want my blah 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 to be doing, sitting on LinkedIn all day." I'm like, well, would you rather we were out 10 hours a day knocking on doors? Because at least in front of my computer, if somebody calls me and needs something, I'm available. But anyway.
But what's also interesting is that, so now we talked about the outbound first, that you have to connect with a lot of people, you have to post content and write comments and stuff like that, and then you reach the inflection point and it sort of switches, and you get a lot of inbound. But what I'm experiencing now, and this is actually contrary to a lot of advice that I see on LinkedIn and from people who also know what they're doing, and that is don't cold pitch in DMs. So I do it. But I'd say that my prospecting is probably also on point. But not only that, but the social proof from when they get the DM and they go to my profile and they see what we do and they see that I have, some content that people have engaged with in the past and a certain amount of followers and whatever it is that they look at, it just works, right? So I've set meetings cold pitching in DMs after cold connecting without a note.
Because I would say it's probably not cold, because you have enough presence that people know who you are. They're already warmed up to you, whether they're connected to you or not.
Some of them are real. Some of them are actually super cold.
And they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you're messaging me right now. And it's like, that doesn't even cross my mind. But anyway.
But I would say some of them are actually cold, like pure, like dead cold, right? And they haven't engaged. They haven't been on my profile. I've never seen them. I looked them up. I searched them and found them, and I connected with them and I DM'd them. But I'm pretty sure that if I took my profile from 2 years ago and then my profile today, my acceptance rate, my response rate, and all of that is way higher now, which is also kind of interesting, right? So if you want to do outbound, if you know who you want to sell to, if you know who you want to get in contact with and so forth, then it's easier if you have something to show for it. You sort of have to demonstrate your value in a way before you can expect people to say yes to a conversation or whatever it is. And I get tons of cold pitches in my DMs, and I rarely take any conversation further than maybe blocking or maybe saying no thanks. But that's where it's at, right? Because it's not done well. But I think when it's done well, it can certainly work.
And it also depends on your products or services too, right? So like Andreas, you may have the perfect product for that type of thing because you can kind of demonstrate it's based on LinkedIn. Like it's maybe lower cost than some of the higher ticket items at first. And so it may work well for you, or if someone's like, if you're in finance, you're trying to manage somebody's money or you're trying to represent them or be a high ticket coach, it could be a totally different conversation. So I think you got to look at the approach of from your business standpoint, your brand standpoint, and then what you sell, of course.
That's a really good point. But I think my point was sort of like, if you have a brand, a personal brand, no matter what you're selling or saying or doing will be easier.
Yes,
right?
100%.
I mean, you wouldn't be on this panel if you weren't active on LinkedIn, right?
Right.
Then you would be, and no offense to anyone consuming, but then you would more likely be consuming this than being on the panel. But if you want to be on a panel, if you want to have opportunities come your way, podcast, whatever you're interested in, then being out there on LinkedIn is what is going to get you that, right? And that doesn't matter if you're selling financial services or wealth management or a SaaS product, right? Being out there and creating your brand will enable you to get more opportunities come your way. And I think that's the baseline, and that's why everyone should do it.
Agreed.
All nodding heads. But so quick question, and you know, anyone can take this, but Alex, because you've kind of run the spectrum, if you will, of all types of sales activities, you know, what advice or recommendation would you give to SDRs or people who are maybe a little bit lower on the totem pole in a company? You know, what advice do you have for them, people who are just getting started on LinkedIn? Like, what activities or what type of engagement is going to get them the best results?
I mean, first and foremost, learn how to use Sales Navigator. Like it's it's a skill that you need to master. It's one of the top social selling technologies that we have at our disposal right now. So if you're not, and I don't just mean, I think, you know, and even myself and a lot of people in the beginning, they think Sales Navigator, cool, I'll go on there and I can search and do some really cool searches. You got to take it a step beyond that, right? You can build lead lists out. You can find people that have posted content in the last 30 days. And I would really start being be strategic, be tactful, like go out there and create some context, jump into conversation on one of their posts, start building some relationships with these folks. And it depends on your sales cycle and what you sell and how long that might look like. It may make sense if you've got massive targets and they're Fortune 500 companies, you probably got to spend more time with certain individuals. There's a little bit more creative element to it versus maybe if you're targeting a founder or entrepreneur, or maybe it's you drop in on one post and then you send a nice video DM and boom, you've got a conversation going. So, but I think first and foremost, just get really familiar with Sales Navigator. It's an incredible tool if you know how to use it. And here's what I'd say too. I've never trained somebody that hasn't gotten results from working that, as long as they work the process and they work it daily. So it's just like anything else. If you eat bad, 5 days out of the week and you choose to eat good one, it's not going to work, right? If you go to the gym 1 day out of the week and need to go 5, it's not going to work. So really start building a process around it. Get good with the Sales Navigator tool, know how to use it, and then and build your time blocks in your day around certain activities.
I love that. And it's I don't know if you knew this or not, Alex, but Jake's doing a Sales Navigator training this afternoon. So that was
I do know that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was a perfect setup for that. But I completely agree. It's such a powerful tool. LinkedIn is like the most powerful database that we have at our disposal, and we need to know how to use these tools effectively. And yeah, it is a little harder, right? If you're not Andreas, if you're not the CEO, if you don't have that like whole built up presence already, getting started can feel daunting. But I love your analogy, right? It's just doing it consistently every single day. Pragya or Ariel, anything that either of you want to add?
No, I'm interested in listening to Alex because I do not know how to use Sales Navigator. So I will just put that out there as the devil's advocate that it is possible to create some personal branding and have success creating meaningful conversations and relationships without that tool. So if I have it, it just intimidates me and I pushed it to the side months ago.
Well, here's what I'd say. I agree. If you look at LinkedIn, you've got to look at it from kind of two sides, right? One's the inbound, one's the outbound. So if you're a sales rep, absolutely post content and get consistent around that. You're going to build your brand so customers come to you. But in the meantime, if you've got a good social selling strategy, you got to hit your quota, right? You got to hit your numbers. You got to book meetings every single week. You need to know how to social sell so you can jumpstart that process. Because if you wait for the content, a lot of different factors, how good you are at creating content, talent comes into play, timing comes into play. Social selling is it's a lot more predictable and it's a lot more day one type results. That's why I teach both.
That's actually a good lead in. Like, I mean, what kind of time frame did it take you all to start seeing some kind of results? And I don't necessarily mean results like you could see in Shield, because I know that those are instant, right? In Shield, you instantly see the progress that you're making in terms of views and comments and engagement. But how long did it take for you to start seeing like business results, like dollars in the bank results?
It took me about a month. But I always joke that, if I spend 24 hours a day there, that's the equivalent of most people's. So that's
when you're showering while you're on LinkedIn, it's a different story. You're in a whole different league. You can need a panel by yourself. Seriously, this is LinkedIn shower time.
And how to completely pitiful and anyway.
Yeah, but I'll just point out that Ariel's in a very saturated space. And seeing results in 1 month is really impressive. We'll maybe say 3 months for the slightly more casual user, but it doesn't take a crazy amount of time. Alex, what about for you?
Yeah, I would say from really getting consistent to winning customers. I mean, mine was probably 4 months. But that being said, I really didn't. I mean, I didn't know the things I know now. So starting over, it's definitely a faster process. But yeah, on the content side, it can take a few months.
Awesome. Andreas, how long before you signed your first customer up from the content that you were putting out on LinkedIn, or at least that you could attribute to it?
Yeah, so that's a good part in the end of your sentence there. So the attribution is super difficult, right? And I think from the start, I kind of knew that my content was helping me close deals. And that's how I view it. But now, obviously, when people come inbound, I'm most certain that the content is driving the activity. But in the beginning, when the content wasn't that successful, so to speak, in terms of engagement and so forth, then I didn't really know back then, but I just kept doing it. But usually I say like 6 months plus before content really kicks in, and you've built an engaged audience who've followed you for some time and so forth. But that's fast still. I mean, 6 months goes by like nothing.
And I can add something that I think I'm extremely lucky that I work in Shield, plus I have Andreas, who's so active and people kind of know him. So we, as his team, actually get to piggyback. If we say that, okay, we want to commit to being consistent, it is so easy to see results. So from me joining Shield to people knowing that Pragya and Shield is something together, it took me less than a month of being consistent 5 days a week, because suddenly he's replying to my content. People are seeing me. And it's just such a blessing that if you can have somebody in your company who's already doing that, then everybody else in the team can really piggyback on that.